Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
January 13th, 1968, Folsom State Prison, California. 2,000 hardened criminals packed into a concrete cafeteria. Murderers, rapists, thieves, men's society had thrown away and forgotten. Then a tall man in black walked onto the makeshift stage. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just looked out at the sea of orange jumpsuits and said 4 words that would change everything. Hello, I'm Johnny Cash. The prisoners erupted. They screamed, they cheered, they pounded tables with their fists. For the first time in years, maybe decades, someone had come to see them. Someone who understood what it meant to be an outcast. But here's what those prisoners didn't know. The man singing for them would become one of America's most beloved legends. Presidents would honor him. The entire music industry would bow before him. Millions would call him a hero. Johnny Cash sang for the forgotten and became unforgettable. This is the story of a man who found his voice in the darkness and used it to light up the world. What would you risk to stand with the outcasts if you knew it would make you a legend? J.R. Cash was born on February 26, 1932, in a 2-room shack in Kingsland, Arkansas. His family were sharecroppers, the poorest of the poor, working someone else's land for barely enough to survive. The Cash family had 7 children, and not enough of anything. Not enough food, not enough money, not enough hope. J.R.'s father, Ray, was a hard man made harder by poverty and failure. When J.R. was 3, the family moved to Dyess, Arkansas, part of President Roosevelt's New Deal program to help struggling farmers. They were given 20 acres and a chance to start over. But starting over didn't erase the pain. J.R.'s older brother Jack was his hero, his protector, his best friend. Jack was everything J.R. wanted to be: strong, kind, faithful. While J.R. dreamed of music in distant places, Jack dreamed of becoming a preacher. On May 12, 1944, 12-year-old J.R. begged Jack to skip work and go fishing with him. The weather was perfect, the creek was calling, and J.R. had a feeling, a terrible, inexplicable feeling, that something bad would happen if Jack went to work. But Jack was responsible. The family needed money. He kissed his little brother goodbye and walked to the high school agriculture shop where he had a part-time job. That afternoon, Jack was pulled into a table saw. The blade nearly cut him in half. J.R. ran to the school when he heard the screams. He found his brother lying in a pool of blood, conscious but dying. Jack lingered for a week, conscious and in agony. As he lay dying, he told his family he could see angels and hear beautiful music. "Can you hear the angels singing?" Jack asked his mother. "No, Jack, I can't hear them," she replied. "But they're so beautiful, Mama, and they're singing just for me." J.R. was 12 years old when his brother died. The guilt would haunt him forever. If only he had convinced Jack to go fishing. If only he had been more persuasive. If only he had saved his brother. Ray Cash blamed J.R. for Jack's death. "The wrong son died," he told him at the funeral. Those words carved themselves into J.R.'s soul and would echo in his mind for the rest of his life. Music became his escape. His mother, Carrie, had taught him gospel songs, and he discovered he had a voice. Deep, resonant, unlike anything anyone had heard before. It was a voice that seemed to carry all the pain and longing of his young life. But music was a luxury the Cash family couldn't afford. J.R. worked in the cotton fields from dawn to dusk, his hands bleeding, his back aching, dreaming of something more than the endless cycle of poverty that had trapped his family for generations. At 18, desperate to escape Arkansas and the ghosts that haunted him there, J.R. enlisted in the Air Force and was stationed in Landsberg, Germany. For the first time in his life, he was away from the poverty and pain of home. In Germany, J.R. bought his first guitar for $5 and taught himself to play. He wrote songs about loneliness and longing, about trains that could carry you away from your troubles, about the brother he'd lost and the guilt he carried. His fellow airmen would gather around when J.R. played, mesmerized by his deep voice and the raw emotion in his songs. They told him he should make records when he got home. J.R. laughed. Who'd want to listen to a poor boy from Arkansas? When he returned home in 1954, J.R. married Vivian Liberto, a girl he'd met before shipping out and courted through letters during his service. They moved to Memphis, where J.R. got a job selling appliances door to door while dreaming of making music. Memphis in 1954 was the center of a musical revolution. Sun Records, owned by Sam Phillips, was where Elvis Presley had just recorded That's All Right. Phillips was looking for something new, something different, something that would capture the changing spirit of America. J.R. Cash, he'd started calling himself Johnny, walked into Sun Records on a sweltering summer day in 1955 with his guitar and two friends. Luther Perkins on electric guitar and Marshall Grant on bass. They called themselves the Tennessee Two. "I want to make a record," Johnny told Phillips. "What kind of music do you play?" Phillips asked. "Gospel," Johnny replied, thinking of his brother Jack and the angels he'd claimed to hear. Phillips shook his head. "Gospel doesn't sell unless you're Mahalia Jackson. Got anything else?" Johnny thought for a moment, then launched into a song he'd written in Germany, "Hey Porter." It was about a train carrying him home, filled with longing and hope and the rhythm of wheels on tracks. Phillips listened, his eyes lighting up. "That's it. That's what we're looking for." Hey Porter became Johnny's first single in June 1955, but it was the B-side that made him famous. "Cry, Cry, Cry." The song shot up the country charts, and suddenly Johnny Cash was a star. But success came with a price. Johnny was on the road constantly, away from Vivian and their growing family. The loneliness that had driven him to music now consumed him. He started taking pills, amphetamines to stay awake during long drives between shows, barbiturates to sleep in unfamiliar hotel rooms. What began as a practical solution became an addiction that would nearly destroy him. In 1956, Johnny recorded I Walk the Line, a song about fidelity and commitment written for Vivian. It became his biggest hit, crossing over from country to pop and making him a household name. The song's distinctive sound came from Johnny's unique approach to rhythm and his band's stripped-down instrumentation. There were no drums, no fancy arrangements, just Johnny's voice, Luther's guitar, and Marshall's bass creating a sound unlike anything on the radio. But even as he sang about walking the line, Johnny was falling off it. The pills made him erratic, unpredictable, dangerous. He missed shows, forgot lyrics, collapsed on stage. His marriage to Vivian crumbled under the weight of his addiction and infidelity. Johnny was becoming everything he'd sworn he'd never be. Unreliable, destructive, a disappointment to everyone who loved him. Then, in 1961, Johnny met June Carter. June was country music royalty, part of the legendary Carter family that had been making music since the 1920s. She was talented, beautiful, and married to country singer Carl Smith. Johnny was also married, but the connection between him and June was undeniable. They met backstage at the Grand Ole Opry, and Johnny later said it was like being struck by lightning. June saw through Johnny's tough exterior to the wounded boy beneath. She saw his pain, his guilt, his desperate need for redemption. "You're not the man you could be," she told him after watching him stumble through a show, high on pills, "but you could be." June became Johnny's musical partner, his emotional anchor, his salvation. Together they recorded It Ain't Me Babe and Jackson, songs that crackled with the electricity between them. But June refused to be with Johnny while he was using drugs. "Get clean," she told him, "and then we'll talk." Johnny's addiction reached its breaking point in 1967. He was arrested for drug possession in El Paso. His career was in shambles, and he'd lost almost everything that mattered to him. That's when he decided to do something unprecedented. Record a live album at Folsom Prison. Columbia Records thought he was crazy. "You want to record where?" Executive Bob Johnston asked. But Johnny understood something they didn't. He'd always felt like an outcast, always identified with the forgotten and the damned. The prisoners at Folsom weren't just his audience, they were his people. "I've been in and out of jails most of my life," Johnny said. "Not as an inmate, but I've been there. I know what it's like to be locked up, to feel forgotten." On January 13, 1968, Johnny Cash walked into Folsom Prison with his guitar, his band, and a portable recording studio. The inmates had been told they could attend the concert if they behaved. What happened next was magic. Johnny opened with Folsom Prison Blues, a song he'd written years earlier about shooting a man in Reno just to watch him die. The prisoners went wild. "I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die," Johnny sang, and 2,000 criminals cheered like he was singing their anthem. For 2 hours, Johnny performed for men who had been written off by society. He sang about crime and punishment, about loneliness and regret, about the possibility of redemption. The prisoners didn't just listen, they participated. They laughed at his jokes, they sang along to his songs, they treated him like family. Between songs, Johnny talked to them like equals. He didn't preach or condescend, he just acknowledged their shared humanity. At Folsom Prison became one of the best-selling live albums of all time. It revitalized Johnny's career and established him as more than just a country singer. He was a voice for the voiceless. The success of the Folsom album led to another prison concert at San Quentin in 1969. This time, the cameras were rolling for a television special. In the audience was a young inmate named Merle Haggard, who would later become a country music legend himself. "Johnny Cash saved my life that day," Haggard said. "He showed me there was another way." Johnny's prison concerts made him a hero to outcasts everywhere. But they also made him a target for critics who said he was glorifying crime. Johnny didn't care. "I've always been drawn to people on the fringes," he said. "The prisoners, the poor, the forgotten. They're my people." In 1968, Johnny finally got clean and married June Carter. She had waited for him, believed in him, loved him through his darkest moments. "June saved my life," Johnny said. "She loved me back to life." The 1970s brought Johnny mainstream success he'd never imagined. He had his own television variety show, The Johnny Cash Show, which featured everyone from Bob Dylan to Louis Armstrong. But Johnny never forgot where he came from. He used his platform to champion civil rights, to speak out against the Vietnam War, to advocate for prison reform. He recorded concept albums about Native American rights, about the plight of migrant workers, about social justice. When other country singers were playing it safe, Johnny was taking risks. "I wear black for the poor and beaten down," Johnny explained in his song Man in Black. "I wear black for the prisoner who has long paid for his crime, but is there because he's a victim of the times." Johnny Cash had become more than a musician. He was a moral voice, a champion of the underdog, a man who used his fame to shine light on society's forgotten corners. But success couldn't heal all wounds. Johnny still struggled with addiction, still carried the guilt of his brother's death, still battled the demons that had driven him to music in the first place. In the 1980s, Johnny's career declined. Country radio moved on to younger artists. Many wrote him off as a relic. Then, in 1994, producer Rick Rubin approached Johnny with an unusual proposition. "I want to strip everything away," Rubin said. "Just you, your voice, and your guitar." The result was American Recordings, an album that stunned the music world. Here was Johnny Cash at 62, his voice weathered by decades of living, singing songs by everyone from Soundgarden to traditional folk artists. The album won a Grammy and introduced Johnny to a new generation. His cover of Nine Inch Nails' Hurt became his final masterpiece, a haunting meditation on mortality that moved audiences to tears. Johnny Cash died on September 12, 2003, just 4 months after June. He was 71 years old. His funeral was attended by presidents and paupers, country singers and rock stars, prisoners and preachers. They came to honor a man who had never forgotten where he came from. Johnny Cash sang for prisoners and outcasts, but he became America's most beloved legend. He started as a poor sharecropper's son from Arkansas and ended as a cultural icon whose influence transcended music. He sang for the forgotten and became unforgettable. He championed the voiceless and became one of the most powerful voices in American culture. He wore black for the downtrodden and became a shining light for millions. Johnny Cash proved that you don't have to choose between authenticity and success, between staying true to your roots and reaching for the stars. He showed us that the greatest legends are made not by abandoning the outcasts, but by standing with them. "I've always been drawn to people on the fringes," Johnny said, "because that's where the truth lives." Johnny Cash found that truth in a prison cafeteria in 1968, singing for men the world had forgotten. And in return, the world made sure it would never forget him. He sang for prisoners and outcasts, but became America's most beloved legend. The man in black, who wore his darkness on the outside so he could shine his light within. Johnny Cash, the outcast who became an icon, the rebel who became a hero, the man who proved that sometimes the best way to reach the top is to start at the bottom and never forget how you got there.